Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Beneath Your Skin. This is Gaia, still going crazy, and with no news, like everyone else, I guess. Hello, my dear, how are you doing?
I'm good, Zoe here. And yeah, my days are melding into one, and I'm trucking along, you know, surviving.
Yeah, nothing else we can do. So we have to survive somehow. Well, thank God we have our podcast. So today we are going to talk about a TV series, a British TV series called The Enfield Haunting. Basically, is the same story we saw in The Conjuring 2, but it's the real thing, the real deal. It's what happened in England, and like always, British TV is so damn good.
Yes.
The whole city was a jewel you want to cherish, you want to keep in your collection because it's worth it. It's so much better than the Conjuring 2. Is so beautiful. It's perfect. The actors were amazing, like it always happens with British TV. British actors, they rock. They are the best. And even in this show, they really proved it. The script is sound. Um, Even the children act very well. It's perfect. It's very good. The directors knew what he was doing. The director of photography knew what he was doing. Everyone knew what they were doing. The end result is so good. You will love it. I promise you, you will love it. So give it a try.
I love the Enfield haunting. Now, I first saw this like when it came out, and then I think I watched it literally a couple of months before I went to see The Conjuring 2. So I had problems with The Conjuring 2 because I was like, you're doing the same story, the Enfield haunting, but you're not doing it as well as the British version. And obviously, the Conjuring 2 is so American, and the ending is so American. Unlike the British one, which is so British. It's like, yeah, it has the happy ending, but British happy endings are kind of, they're bittersweet, and they're more about personal discovery and finding peace within yourself rather than like the giant fight for survival fighting evil. It was a very much a more British tale because it's subtler and it develops the characters more, and it develops the characters that you need to know more about. So it goes more into the relationship between the siblings, and it also plays this as a coming of age because the girls are going through puberty and growing up, and like the older sister is starting to like boys and the younger sister's feeling a disconnect there. It's a story of like loss and bereavement and dealing with that and how it can tear your family apart and how it can like bring you together with Maurice and his wife, how they lost a daughter and their coping mechanisms, or the fact that they didn't cope and it took this event for them to finally like address their problems. It's a story about a family that's lost the father figure and are desperate to replace that father figure with somebody else and not address the anger they feel about the father leaving. So it's all about like being haunted and possessed by your own personal demons and your own personal stress and negativity, which obviously is a lot of things that end up fueling a poltergeist. So, you know, you could watch this whole thing and think that there never was a poltergeist. It was all about all their emotional stakes and mental well-being haunting them. But there's also definitely a haunting going on here, which is subtle and creepy and no CGI and very minimal, like, you know, big old like jump scares and like over the top. Like it's still all played on that little thin edge of, is this real, is this not real, so on the cusp. And they bring in more experts and they bring in different points of view and more people investigate it, and they don't just fight a made up demon at the end of it. They address the issues of why they are holding on to this possession and why this possession is now possessing them because they're not willing to let go. And it's only by letting go and realizing what's happening that things can move on. You can move on. The spirits can move on. Like the demon, the energy, the negativity in this house can finally move on. And it's like it's very good. It's so good.
Yeah, it really is. And what I really loved is that this show will satisfy the skeptic and the people who wants to believe. Both categories will be so fully satisfied. It's beautiful. It got everything we wanted to see in the movie. It got the investigations, Maurice realizing who the spirit could be, this Joe. And how does he do that in a time when they didn't have computers or cell phones, and the information weren't just a click away? He goes to the library and he used the list of people who could vote. And that's brilliant because that's exactly how things were done in the 70s. And in the movie, we see the psychiatrist claiming that those were public informations. Yes, but can you really see an 11 years old going to the library thinking about the list with all the names of people able to vote in the past and going through a very long document? I personally can't. At 11, I wouldn't even think about doing that. So it's very good. It got really everything we wanted to see in the movie. What I really like is that the tension, the fear, this sensation of impending doom is created with little details, with little things you don't see coming. Like one of the last scenes in the movie, in the show, when they are sat around the table and Janet see herself from the outside of the window, and you are left wondering what happened, how did it happen, what's going on. And I in this show I love that they didn't forget. They are telling us a story of the 70s. So they kept that racism that was typical of the 70s when they tried to exorcise the spirit. Janet says, you did this in Brazil, where all the crazy come from. And yes, that was what I wanted to see. I in the age of politically correct, I was so happy to see that the writers didn't sacrifice the historical truth on the altar of not offending anyone. It was refreshing. It was good. And what it was good, but it was also a punch in your gut, is that in the 70s, yes, the electroshock therapy was a thing. And they had the courage to show us what Janet went through. I don't know if it really happened to her, but for sure it happened to someone else, to some other Janet, to some other girls ending up in the mental ward of an hospital because they were hysteric or because they were just not conform to the society. So that was a huge wake up, a painful punch in your feeling, because it's the first time we see something so brutal in one of the movies we watched for this podcast. And we tend to forget that that was reality, the reality in the 70s, in the 60s, in the 50s. So, how many women went through that kind of torture? You have to wonder. Another thing I really loved is that they gave us another point of view. about why a spirit or an entity or a ghost could stay on our level. Because sometimes they don't stay because they have unfinished business. Sometimes it can happen that they are trapped because we are the ones with unfinished business. Like Maurice. Maurice needed to let his Janet go. And we can believe she was really there. We can believe it was just something he made up because he felt guilty for not being present when she was alive. We can believe what we want, but at the end, Maurice had to forgive himself and let his daughter go to be able to help the Janet that was still alive. And it was so well done. Okay, so forgive me. I just have to say something else,
No,
and then I,
it's beautiful.
and then I will let you talk. I promise. Um, Two scenes. I love so much how they were filmed. When we hear Margaret's voice off, the first time she is telling us the history of the Lorona, this woman killing
Yes.
her children to be able to be with the man she loved. And she's telling us with voice off, while our attention is focused on the mother walking outside the house, crying, desperate in the night. And it was so powerful, an easy scene to film, and yet it was so powerful. And the other time we have the same thing happening is when we see Janet going through hell in the mental institution, and Margaret is once again telling us another heartbreaking story about realizing that the hell she is living is her real life, and the good life she thought she had was just a dream. What's beautiful in this show is that they didn't need special effects or expensive things and escamotage. That's why I adore British TV.
I'm so glad that you enjoyed this because obviously I kept going. You must watch the Enfield Haunting. You must. You'll see something different. I mean, I loved it for so many reasons. Most of them I think you've explained beautifully. The authenticity of this. Like, not only does it have the setting of the period, but it's filmed as if it was filmed at that time. So it makes it look older than it is for something that wasn't filmed in the 70s. It's really good at staging that. And then British stuff tends to have this real strong grasp of realism. Like, we have like a cinema movie a cinema movement of realism. Like, that's where directors like Ken Loach and stuff came from. Just actual films about everyday working lives of everyday people. And this is very much like those movies about the everyday life of the British working class. But there's also a horror film in there, but and a ghost story in there, and like, but it's also such a poignant drama, and as I said, and a tale about loss and overcoming your personal demons, like, are just as like terrifying as actual demons a lot of the time, and sometimes even worse so, because if you can't let go of them, they won't it's not about them trying to let go of you and trying to get them out. It's about you letting go of these things. And it's such a beautiful like notion and a beautiful idea. And one thing is, when the film is scary, there are some legitimate like, ooh, that's a bit of uncomfortable bit. And then the other thing about it that I love that's so British is it very much has that British sense of humour, in which, as a Brit, we laugh at ourselves and we laugh at the situations we're in. We find a lot of humour in, we love a bit of black humour, but we found a lot of, like, what's it called? Is it graveyard humour? Oh, what's the term for it? There's a term for gallows humour. Gallows humour. So like, we laugh at our, so if things are going really badly, we turn it into a bit of a joke. It's just part of like our nature. It's something that I think Americans find hard about, like our culture and our films, and when we start making jokes about, cancer or death or things. It's because that's how we cope. It's one of our coping mechanisms. So in this film, when they're sitting there making jokes about, like, oh, did the poltergeist do it? Or don't say that. And they're like having these warm family moments and making light of the situation they're in, because the only way you can deal with that, and the British way to deal with things like that, is to laugh about the situation you're in. When things are terrible, you make jokes. The climate at the moment outside with the pandemic is, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So these will be comedy sketches in no time, and we can do that. We can laugh at misery and stuff because it's a coping mechanism. And I like the fact that this show definitely reflected that British sensibility, and yeah, the fact that there would kind of like be you've got to laugh or you'll cry aspect to it. And I love how much more they flesh out the experience of Janet, from like how people would bully her, like would she be accepted, how she couldn't accept herself, how she would get angry, how she's a preteen, she runs away from home, she wants to be with her dad but she knows she doesn't want to be with her dad. And yeah, and how much they portrayed her as much more of the troubled child, because she was a troubled child. We know it was a troubled child from like a family that was going through a lot, and that razor's edge line of like being possessed or doing something for attention. And it's such a thin line. In every single scene they give you the supernatural, but they also give you the realistic answer. So you kind of like keep going, well, there's a reason for this, there could have been a reason for this, and it didn't need to be injected with anything else. It didn't need the Crooked Man. And as much as I love the Crooked Man like song, because it's something I used to sing as a kid, like, we didn't need a giant crooked man to be running around the house after them. We didn't need a CGI dog turning into a CGI bloke. We didn't need a made up nun like randomly like trying to get to Ed and Lorraine in the middle of a film that's meant to be very much a family drama about broken people, and broken people coming together and finding a way to fix themselves by letting go, but the supernatural world finding a way to use it for themselves. And I like the idea that like Janet became the conduit for these ghosts, and at first like there was like Joe, and he was the strongest of these presences, and he was like using her to be like but by like allowing him to move on, the bottleneck was broken. So all these other spirits are turning up going, I need to say my message. No, I want to say my message. I have something to say. And it's just like, you can't all just shout through this girl. It's causing her to go a bit crazy. Like, you can't all just be possessing her and using her as a conduit. And so luckily, like, Maurice's Janet came through and was allowed to give her message, which was beautiful. And all the other ghosts just kind of went, no, actually, just being able to say goodbye and a final goodbye will allow us all to let go. And yeah, it didn't need a big, like, let's fall out the window in a storm and blah, 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 and all the random bells and whistles of a Hollywood film. It needed to feel grounded and realistic.
And I love how they didn't glamour the bad things happening to to working classes. All those people were broken because society wanted them broken. It broke my heart when Janet went to her dad because that's what she needed. But the dad rejected her because he has a new family now and he doesn't have time for her anymore. So she is looking for another father figure, and she finds it in Maurice. But when Maurice goes on with his own life, she feels betrayed because once again she's left alone, or at least she feels like she's left alone. And in the end, the one we think is the more vulnerable, the one who we fear for, is the stronger one, is the strongest one, because in the end she realizes that in truth it's not about her, it's about Maurice's guilt. It's about a man who needs to let go because he can't be forgiven because there was nothing to forgive. The accident was just that, a bad accident, something bad happening to his family, but he didn't cause it. So he has to forgive himself. And through the Janet of nowadays, his daughter Janet teaches him how to let go. And that was a beautiful goodbye. And as you say, the end is a bittersweet end. A friendship was somehow blossoming, but we can imagine that Maurice and Guy won't meet up again, even if Guy invited him to work with him again. But it's possible it was just something said in that moment, because otherwise there would have been an awkward goodbye, and men don't do awkward goodbyes. A bittersweet end, because in the end Betty and Maurice are back together. They are back to be a real family, but they still had lost a daughter. Nothing can change that. Nothing can give Janet back to them. So they have to learn to live with the loss, the worst loss a parent can feel and experiment. And even the family, yes, they are now free, but sooner or later they will split up, because they will grow up, they will choose different paths, they will leave the house, they will start their lives, and the unity, the union this family got back won't stay like that forever, because life goes on. So it was beautiful, but as you say, it bittersweet.
Yeah.
Thank you for making me watch this. It was a breath of fresh air
Yeah.
after everything we watched.
I know. Also, I do think it's like, you know how we decided we are definitely, and I'm still standing by, we are not going to watch La Llorona. It's so weird that, because I'd forgotten that they reference it in this. And I'm like, but they don't reference it in The Conjuring 2. So, like, it seems so weirdly connected. Did the people who make The Conjuring 2 watch this film for influences and ideas, and then they heard about the Llorona and made a movie about that? Because I'm like, that is, of all the stories to tell in the middle of this to show like a mother's turmoil, they chose that storyline, and I was like, wait a minute, they're talking about La Llorona here, and it's like, how weird. Like, so even though they're completely like not by the same people, different, there's everything we've done still connected. So I think that's a bit of like weird supernatural magic in that.
And this is how the American people should have done the connection.
Yes.
They should have learned from this. We are not going to watch the Llorona, as you said, but I have a small fun fact about that movie.
Ooh.
It happened in Canada, in Montreal, if I'm not wrong. It came out at the same time as the Detective Pikachu movie. The theater was full with children with their families ready to watch a Pokemon movie. Something happened and a mistake was made. So the lights went off, and the first scene of La Llorona showed on screen. And after a frozen moment of pure terror, hundreds of children began to scream, terrified, because yes, they showed La Llorona in the theater where they were supposed to show the Pokemon movie.
Oh
and of course
dear.
it ended up on the newspaper, because all these parents grabbing their children and running outside trying to stop their children from keeping watching an horror movie they were too young to actually
Oh
be
God.
allowed to watch. So
Well, there we
it was
go.
pure chaos.
That is the true curse of La Llorona. Oh wow.
I feel bad for those children, but above all, I feel bad for those parents, because
Gotcha.
you can imagine how long they had to fight with nightmares and children demanding to sleep in their beds. Yeah, that was the only fun fact about La Llorona. But no, we are not going to watch it. So sorry, people.
No, no.
If you are fan, no, we can't.
No, yeah. Just no.
Okay, so if you don't have anything else to say,
No.
then it's time to say goodbye. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to tell us, drop us a line on our Twitter account at beneath_your, or look for us on our Facebook page. We are on Spotify, Beneath Your Skin, and we can be found on Pinecast. So, thank you for listening, people. See you next time. Bye.
Always a pleasure, and I'm so glad to have shared this show with you and that you enjoy it. And I hope everybody else goes and watches this and enjoys it. But for now, bye byes.